"Don't save me," she said. His reply changed both their lives. "Before we begin, comment your country so I know where the story is reaching." The sun had barely climbed over the dry Wyoming ridge when Elias Mercer spotted her, a lone figure slumped beneath an old cottonwood. Dust swirling around her like the desert was trying to bury the last of her strength. Her wrists were bound, her dress torn from miles of rough dragging, and her voice, when it finally reached him, was nothing more than a scratch of breath. "Don't save me," she whispered. Not dramatic, not fearful, just a woman convinced her life wasn't worth the trouble. Elias didn't move at first. He'd spent years avoiding anything that pulled at the heart. Loss had made sure of that. But something about her posture, the way she kept her eyes lower like she had already apologized to the world too many times, snapped the quiet shell he lived inside. He took one step closer. Then another. "I'm not here to decide your fate," he said, voice steady. "But I'm damn sure not leaving you to die." Her eyes flicked up, tired, confused, expecting cruelty, not mercy. Wind brushed through the cottonwood branches. A crow called from somewhere far off. And in that quiet, Elias Mercer made a choice that would tear open his past and rewrite both their futures. He reached for the rope. Elias didn't cut the ropes fast. He cut them carefully, like he feared sudden freedom might startle her into breaking apart. When the last strand snapped, she didn't collapse into him or clutch her wrists. She simply pulled her hands close to her chest, as if trying to make herself small enough to disappear. He offered water. She stared at the canteen, like it was a trick. "You can drink," he said. "No one's here but you and me." Her hesitation wasn't stubbornness. It was learned fear, the kind that takes root only after someone's been pushed past the point of feeling human. She finally reached for it, not boldly, slow, deliberate, watching him the whole time to gauge danger. One sip, then another. Her throat trembled with each swallow, as if her body was arguing with itself about trusting life again. "What's your name?" Elias asked. Nothing, not even a flicker. He checked her for injuries with the same gentle distance a man used when handling a wounded animal. Her ankles were bruised, her shoulders scraped. Dust worked deep into her hair. But it was the way she flinched at shadows that told him the real story. Someone had taken more than her freedom. Elias stood, offering a hand. "We're heading to my ranch. You'll be safe there." She didn't take his hand, but she rose, slow, shaky, and followed him anyway, not because she trusted him, but because she had nothing left but the hope he might be different. Elias didn't speak much on the ride back. Silence was something he wore like a coat. The woman rode behind him on the same saddle, her hands gripping the back of his coat lightly, barely trusting her own balance. Every bump in the trail made her tense. Every distant sound made her flinch. Survival had rewired her nerves into tight springs. By the time they reached his ranch, the sun had dipped low. Elias dismounted first and offered his hand again. She hesitated, then took it, only long enough to steady herself before pulling away. Inside the small cabin, lantern light softened the rough edges of the world. Elias lit the flame, set out a tin cup of warm broth, and pushed it toward her. "You're safe here," he said, knowing safety meant nothing coming from a stranger. She didn't drink, didn't sit, stood there like a deer that knew walls could trap just as easily as open plains. Elias stepped back, giving her distance. "You can have the cot," he said. "I'll take the porch tonight." Still no words, but her gaze, fearful, restless, finally settled on him long enough to read his intentions. Whatever she saw wasn't trust, but it wasn't danger either. She took the bowl, tiny sips, measured breaths, life creeping back an inch by inch. As he stepped outside, Elias paused at the doorway, watching her from the corner of his eye. A woman who wouldn't speak, a past she couldn't share, and a quiet ranch that suddenly felt like it was holding its breath for what came next. Elias barely slept. The porch boards were hard, but that wasn't the reason. It was a sound, or rather, the lack of it, coming from inside the cabin. The woman hadn't made a single noise since he stepped out. No shifting on the cot, no breathing he could hear through the thin walls. Just silence thick enough to feel. When dawn finally brushed pale light across the yard, Elias pushed the door open slow. She was sitting up on the cot, blanket pulled to her chin, eyes fixed on a window like she had been watching for danger all night. "You rest at all?" he asked. She blinked once. Maybe that was her yes. He warmed water over the stove, poured a small basin, and set on the table. "You can wash if you want. I'll step outside." Still no words. But her eyes softened just a fraction, as if she wasn't used to someone offering something without demanding something back. He stepped out, giving her more time than she probably needed. When he returned, she was by the window again, hair damp, face clean, wrapped in the blanket like it was armor. He placed a gentle meal on the table, soft bread, warm beans, and sat across the room so she wouldn't feel cornered. At last she spoke, voice quiet and rough like she hadn't used it in days. "My name is Mira." Elias didn't move, didn't react too strong. "Good to meet you, Mira." Her lips pressed together. Not quite a smile, but the first hint she wanted to exist in this world again. For the first time since finding her under that cottonwood, Elias felt something shift. Not trust yet, but the beginning of something that could grow if they both let it. The ranch settled into a slow rhythm over the next 2 days. Mira stayed close to the window, studying the land like she expected every shadow to grow teeth. Elias worked the corral, glancing toward the house more often than he admitted. Neither spoke much, but silence between them had changed. It wasn't fear anymore. It was two people trying to remember how to exist around another soul. By the third morning, Elias noticed something that soured his breath. A footprint. Fresh. Too fresh. It wasn't his. He knew the pattern of his own worn boots. This one was smaller, sharper in the heel, angled toward the barn. Whoever made it had walked right up to the edge of the corrals, then doubled back toward the ridge. Someone had been watching. He walked inside, dust still clinging to his boots. Mira sensed it instantly. Her posture tightened, eyes sharpening like she was bracing for pain. Elias kept his voice low but firm. "There was someone here last night." Her throat worked, but she didn't speak. "I need to know something," he continued. "Is somebody looking for you or hunting for you?" Her fingers trembled around the blanket she held. She didn't break down or plead. She simply closed her eyes for one breath, gathering strength she didn't have. Then she said quietly, "They won't stop." It wasn't fear in her voice. It was knowledge, hard-earned, painful, absolute. Elias felt his jaw tighten. He'd save her from dying under a tree. Now he realized saving her wouldn't end there. He set his hat on the table, leaning in just enough for her to hear the promise beneath his words. "Whoever they are, they're not taking you from here." For the first time, Mira didn't look away, and in her eyes, a flicker of trust finally appeared, small, fragile, but real. Elias didn't press her right away. He stepped back, gave her space, let the silence stretch long enough for her breathing to steady. Mira wasn't someone you corner for answers. Life had already done that far too many times. Finally, she sat on the edge of the cot, fingers knotted tight in the blanket, eyes fixed on the floor. "They took me because I saw something," she said, voice thin but clear. "Something I wasn't meant to." Elias stayed standing, hands resting on the back of a chair, steady as a fence post. "Tell me?" She swallowed. "A rancher's wife. She didn't die the way the town believes." Her voice trembled. "They say my people did it. They say I was part of it. But it was her husband. He killed her, blamed us, and the riders followed his lie." Elias's jaw clenched. The West was full of men who cleaned their guilt by dirtying someone else's name. "They wanted me gone," Mira continued. "Dead would have been easier for them, but fear lasts longer. So they hung me up where travelers could see. A message." Elias felt the truth settle heavy in the room. She wasn't being hunted because she was dangerous. She was being hunted because she lived through a truth powerful men wanted buried. Mira lifted her eyes slowly to his, raw, scared, waiting for rejection. "You still want me here," she whispered. "After knowing this?" Elias didn't move for a breath. Then another. Finally, he pulled the chair closer and sat, elbows resting on his knees. "Mira, I don't give a damn about their lies. I care about what I see right in front of me." Her breath hitched barely, but enough for him to notice. "You're staying," he added, If trouble comes, it'll meet me first. For the first time, a tiny spark of warmth eased into Mira's eyes. Not trust, not safety, but the beginning of believing she wasn't alone anymore. The days settled into a strange quiet, the kind that makes every small sound feel louder. Mira stayed near the window again, but this time her posture had changed. Less like prey, more like someone preparing to face whatever came next. Elias worked outside with a watchful eye, every chore done with half his attention on the ridgeline. By late afternoon, clouds thickened over the plains. The air turned heavy. Storm weather, but not the kind that came from the sky. Elias was tightening a loose fence rail when he heard it, the crunch of gravel under hooves. Slow, intentional, too deliberate to be a traveler passing through. He wiped his hands, walked to the porch, and saw a lone rider coming up the path. A man in a dusty brown coat, hat pulled low, horse carrying more weight in its silence than its saddle. Mira appeared behind Elias. Breath caught her throat, though she made no sound. Her fingers gripped the doorframe so tightly her knuckles paled. The rider stopped 10 paces from the porch. "You the man running this place?" he asked, voice calm but cold around the edges. Elias didn't blink. "I am. I'm looking for someone. A girl. Claims she witnessed something she shouldn't be. Folks say she ran this way." Elias crossed his arms, grounding himself. What folks say and what's true usually ain't the same thing. The rider's eyes sharpened. "You see anyone suspicious pass through?" Mira shrunk back, breath trembling. Elias didn't look at her. He didn't need to. His answer was already shaped in the steel of his voice. "No, haven't seen a soul but the cattle." A long beat, wind brushing dry grass. Then the rider gave a thin smile, the kind that read trouble more than kindness. "Well," he said, "if she's here, we'll find her." He turned his horse and rode off slow, like a man expecting to return. When he disappeared beyond the ridge, Elias stepped back inside. Mira stood frozen, fear tightening every muscle. "They know," she whispered. Elias shook his head. "No, they're guessing, and guessing ain't knowing. But they'll be back." He met her gaze, steady, grounded, unshaken. "So will I, every time." Something shifted in her then, a crack in the fear, a breath that reached deeper than panic. For the first time, she didn't just trust that Elias would protect her. She believed he wanted to. That night, the wind carried no breeze, only tension, the kind that sits on a man's shoulders and reminds him the world is watching. Elias kept the lantern low, sitting by the table sharpening a knife not for violence, but for work, for distraction, for the steady rhythm a worried mind needs. Mira paced softly near the window. Not frantic, measured. She was thinking, weighing things, building courage from pieces she didn't know she still had. Finally, she stopped. "You should have told him," she whispered. "Giving me up?" Elias didn't even look up from the blade. "That ain't happening. You don't owe me anything." He set the knife down, slow and deliberate, the scrape of metal onward slicing the silence. "Mira, the desert teaches you who you are. A coward runs. A fool fights. A decent man stands between danger and someone who can't stand alone." Her breath caught. Not fear this time. Something deeper, more vulnerable. "You don't even know me," she said quietly. "Maybe not," he replied, leaning back. "But I know pain when I see it, and I know when someone deserves a chance." Mira lowered herself onto the edge of the cot, knees pulled close, blanket around her shoulders like a shield she was learning to lower. After a long moment, she spoke again, voice steadier than before. "When they took me, they said anyone who helped me would pay for it. They meant it." Elias nodded. "Good thing I don't scare easy." Lightning flickered somewhere far off, silent and soft, lighting her face for half a heartbeat. She looked at him with something that wasn't trust yet, but wasn't fear anymore either. "You're not like the men I knew," she said. Elias gave a small, tired half-smile. "Not trying to be." She let out the smallest breath, a release of a weight she carried alone too long. For the first time, Mira lay down without watching the door. And for the first time, Elias stayed awake, not because he feared danger, but because he knew he cared what happened to her. Everything between them had shifted, quietly, inevitably. The storm didn't break the sky that night, but something else broke the silence at dawn. Hoofbeats, more than one, moving with purpose. Elias was already on the porch before Mira opened her eyes. The morning light was weak, washed pale across the dirt, the kind of light that made danger feel colder. Mira stepped into the doorway, blanket around her shoulders, breath stuck in her chest the moment she saw them. 3 riders, not the one from yesterday. These men carried the confidence of those sent to finish what someone else started. The lead rider pulled up first. Thick coat, eyes too sharp to be mistaken for decent work. "We heard you weren't too helpful yesterday," he called out. Elias didn't flinch. Wasn't lying either. The man gave a thin, humorless grin. "Funny thing about lies. They get easier to spot when you've told as many as I have. We'll check the place." Elias stepped off the porch, calm but immovable. "You'll turn around and ride back out." The second rider's hand slipped toward his holster. Not drawing, just reminding. The third scanned the house, seeing shadows, seeing possibility. Mira stayed silent in the doorway, but her fear was a heat on Elias's back. He didn't turn, didn't blink. "I've only got one rule on this land," he said, voice even. "You don't go where you're not welcome." A tense stillness followed. Even the horses seemed to sense the line drawn in the dust. The lead rider exhaled slowly, weighing the risk, weighing the trouble of forcing a fight with a man who clearly wasn't built to fold. Finally, he jerked his chin. "Fine, for now. But if she's here, this ends one way." The 3 riders turned and rode off, but not fast enough to be harmless, not slow enough to be gone for good. When the last hoofbeat faded, Elias stepped back inside. Mira stood rigid, eyes full of the truth both of them now understood. "They'll come again," she whispered. Elias nodded. "And we'll be ready." Something opened in her expression then, not panic, not despair, resolve, a strength she hadn't been allowed to feel in months. For the first time, she wasn't running, and Elias wasn't letting her face anything alone. The riders didn't return at sundown like Elias expected. They came earlier, while the sun still hung low in copper over the plains. 2 shapes first, then a third, then more behind them, not charging, not shouting, just closing in with quiet certainty, the kind that didn't need noise to be deadly. Elias had already moved Mira to the back of the cabin, where the wall was thickest. She wasn't cowering anymore. Her face was set, steady, ready, like she had stepped back into her own life piece by piece. "You said we'd be ready," she whispered. "We are," Elias answered, checking the door. "But I'm not letting them take you. Not today, not ever." Outside, the riders spread out like wolves circling a wounded deer, but they misread the scene. Mira wasn't wounded anymore, and Elias wasn't alone. The lead rider called out, voice raised with forced confidence. "Last chance, Mercer. Hand over the girl, and walk away with all your bones intact." Elias didn't answer him. He spoke to Mira instead. "You trust me?" Her reply was instant, clear, without trembling. "Yes." That one word carried everything. The miles she survived, the pain she endured, the truth she finally believed. She wasn't alone anymore. Elias stepped out onto the porch, door half closed behind him. "I told you before," he said, voice carrying across the yard. "No one comes in uninvited." The riders shifted. Guns twitched. Horses snorted. But they hadn't counted on the storm rolling in behind them. Thunder cracking overhead, wind whipping dust into their eyes. Spooked horses reared, stumbling back. The formation broke in seconds. The sky chose a side. Elias grabbed Mira's hand, and together they moved behind the cabin, slipping into the brush as the riders struggled to regain control. The storm swallowed noise, swallowed tracks, swallowed everything that would have betrayed them. By nightfall, they were miles away, crossing a shallow creek under sky washed clean. Mira squeezed his hand. "Where do we go now?" Elias didn't hesitate. "Where they can't reach you. Where you can live again. Where we both can." She looked up at him. No fear, no doubt, just quiet hope. And for the first time in years, Elias felt something he thought he'd buried with the past. A future together. They disappeared into the dark horizon. Two people who had every reason to break, but chose, instead, to begin.